What did you enjoy about the process? It really isn't meant to put anybody down. It really is a learning experience, and I thought that it was wonderful, actually, in terms of what we shared with each other. What were some of the things that really stood out for you in terms of this opportunity to share with each other?
Well, I just like hearing from everyone, all the different perspectives. It seems like everyone is doing different things, but it's all sort of coming together. My feeling at year 4, and this is exactly the point where I feel like we should be, we're learning from each other and gaining information, but everyone's going down that same path. So I appreciate these sessions. I think it's one of my favorite parts of the whole project is just hearing what all the faculty are doing.
Well, I was going to say I really enjoyed the discussions about the community college and the university faculty working together, and I especially enjoyed hearing about how faculty are looking at student feedback and what students need, and sort of trying to get in the mode of the student's head and figuring out how are we going to teach this or get them to understand concepts. I loved the math, the problem solving, word problems, and practical, anywhere that you had a practical application. I thought that was, for me, that just as a student would just float my boat.
Yeah, and I think that, you hit on something, conceptual learning versus skills, how essential both are, but it's also essential for students to see the connections between them, so that's something to develop deep understanding. It's really, really neat to see that. What areas, does anybody else want to share something that's really positive?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what you said, because I really think we don't share enough, but how do we make time for this stuff? But it's been great today. I've got some follow-up things I want to talk to people about. And some of the comments we got from engineering were share more, tell us more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know how we do it.
But remember, that's where you use non-traditional methods, right? And I think online space, you say, you know what? We just developed a training for how to use Excel. Maybe you could use this in your courses, or maybe you could tweak it to be used in your courses too. Where just a quick way of, maybe a weekly or bi-weekly, like these are some of the things we're working on. It could be a quick little message, and then that's where you put it all together, like highlights of what's happening, and it could be once a month for, whatever time constraints you have, but just be able to share that these are some really cool things happening in our department. It's a neat way to do that. Even for you, like some of the tools you're using, I think a lot of people don't know how to use these tools, so it would be great to say, we tried this, and even having, a clip of this is what it looks like in the classroom, so people are more willing to say, you know what, I do want to try it and see what it looks like, and see if it works for me too. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else? What are some gaps that you saw you really didn't see much of?
Well, and I'm critical of myself about this too. We didn't refer, if you're doing research in your own field, you start with a literature review, and we didn't refer much to what other people are doing. I think we were all doing it. I'm sure you were all looking at the national scene, and we rely on ASCE again, but I was just kind of dismayed we didn't do that. We didn't say that here.
Yes, and I thought about it. It's like who pointed out? You pointed out that we do sustainability with everything. Well, good. It's good, and you know that, but your students don't necessarily know that, so you have to point that out to them sometimes. Same thing with research. We live in a research world many times. Everything you pull out has been, studied in depth, and actually making those connections makes so much sense. And getting students to interact with primary, literature is just a missed opportunity in a way. But that's what I love about being reflective, because I saw some big gaps in some of the areas. I saw a lot on, curriculum was strong, collaboration, with community colleges was strong. I would say with everybody, really, just having that two-way conversation. What are you doing? What are we doing? How are we working together to advance this? But there were some gaps. What's another gap anybody else noticed? opportunities, even for students to communicate with each other, right? That was a big gap. I mean, we heard some small group work, we heard, some interactions that way, but it's like, well, how will students be sharing what they know? When are students gonna have opportunities to ask their own questions? We did do very introductory level classes, but that's what gets students excited about the next step, right? And if they never get a chance to ask their own questions, they get turned off, and they're like, oh, if this is what it's like to be a chemistry major, I don't think so, so actually getting students to ask their own questions and be curious about finding those solutions throughout their experience makes them want to do that next step, right? For retention purposes, it's a really neat opportunity to do that. I know what happens.
It's a little out of sorts. There we go.
So, one of the things that I was really intrigued about, especially after hearing engineering and all the applications, is we live in a world where, with the healthcare and all this, and, I teach a course called Molecular Basis Disease. One of the things I do is look at diseases in different areas of the world, and what diseases prevail depend on your economics. And it's too bad that business isn't included, because business is a big part of, and policy. And, with this new healthcare, this is a great opportunity. This is sustainability. These are resources. Money is a resource. And, this is an important issue. And this is an issue that's going to impact our students, because they're going to be nurses, doctors, they're going to be consumers of the medical system. So I thought someone should be doing a big project or interdisciplinary project on health care and the economics behind it. And
Yes, and something else I noticed, that a missed opportunity that could definitely be elevated to an opportunity that could incorporate this is, even in chemistry, when we do labs that are isolated, we miss that opportunity, right? So it's almost like they're very skills-driven labs, but it goes back to that deep understanding and the conceptual understanding that students need to walk away with, You actually just said something. Do you remember what it was like? Students need to understand that economics and diseases are connected. That's a very basic understanding, right? Can students tell you that by the end of whatever course you're teaching? Those are the type of understandings. I actually want a scientifically literate student to be able to say, you know what? I get it now. I see the connection between economics and healthcare, and I see that that's an impact in our communities, and it also does this, and that, or whatever it is. Whatever connections they've made, when do they get opportunities to make those connections? And from what I hear in the assessments that are traditional, they don't have those opportunities. They don't have opportunities to connect those concepts, right? That's another thing. Labs that are driven by a question, overarching question, that is bigger than the lab, but they're learning a tool to be able to answer that question among many tools that can be used to answer that question, So that's something else that, in terms of taking it to kind of the next level, that's what gets students engaged and hooked on wanting to learn more, and to see the interconnections that disciplines are not isolated. We teach them in isolation, but they're not. And understanding finance in the context of engineering is essential. Understanding cost benefit, understanding materials and their costs, those type of things are essential. I actually recently had interacted with an engineer who got fired because she kept going over her budget, on a project, and it's how essential it is to know that, right? But nobody ever told her that until they let her go, and I'm like, that's unfair too, right? But anyway, so that was another gap that I noticed. So yes, grounding it in a bigger question is essential, and I think there's opportunity in every discipline that you have to be able to do that. So that's another thing, chemistry, engineering, and for GPS systems, totally you can ground that in. What does that mean? Like, even when you see surveyors on the street, what are they doing? Like, at a very basic level, but then taking it to conceptually, this is what it means. Lastly, that last level, that last inclusivity, I think we take it for granted that we're doing inclusive practices, that I think some of you identified strategies that can meet different learners' needs, using visuals, using online platforms, using that. But I didn't hear anybody actually talk about disaggregating their data by populations and understanding if there's specific needs that certain populations have. So that's an area that I see improvement, just an opportunity to learn. I did see another great opportunity in the civil engineering technologies, connection to non-traditional fields for women. You know, I don't know what the women population numbers look like for you, but it could be an opportunity where you say, you know what? We need to learn from organizations that are really working with women to enhance those numbers, and obviously for just engineering in general, computer science, you know, things like that. What strategies can we specifically embed to make sure that we retain our girls? I mean, the bigger question is we retain our students, period, right? But when it comes to targeted strategies, how do we retain girls? So that's an area that I thought you could definitely use, you know, a little more.
I teach data analysis, I teach complementary statistics, I'm very frustrated as chair. For me to have put that chart up there that I did, you can't imagine how much work that was.
Yeah.
And I maintain, with the help of our administrative assistant, the Center of Brookston, a complete database on all of our students. That's how I'm able to do that.
Right.
Because our data systems on campus don't support our doing data analysis.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts.
Nor does our
You guys
email.
have a half-time data person just because it's so difficult on this campus.
But I think it's so essential, and I think that's actually, remember I told you, Nate, the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity, they actually have a data person that comes on campus to help disaggregate that, especially when it comes to career and technical education, because of the non-traditional representation of women. That's one of their biggest things. Or men for nursing, for example, or men in, you know, early childhood education. They have different areas that are very underrepresented, and others that are not. So they focus on the underrepresented areas, whether it's for women or for men. So anyway, so yeah, but those are a couple of observations.
Any of those questions
Yeah.
without creating our own databases.
Wow. And, you know, systemically, that's a huge issue, because especially for a Hispanic serving institution, you need to have that. And that's where, when it comes to affecting change at the higher up level, you know, that's something we should be pushing for, all of you, as a joint force, because you need that type of data. So anyway, thank you, really appreciate that, and I hope that you really walked away with awesome things from this.